meet you outside, away from the crowd. Just you and me together. Will I see better outside?
Hey, how you doing? It's me, Nomad, again, and this is another video in our learner series, beginner learner series on how to be an urban nomad and escape the matrix. So in this video, let's assume that you're looking actively for an RV right now. And I'm going to talk specifically about RVs. Some of this info applies to camper vans because they're kind of also RVs, but I'm going to talk more about RVs. I'm not really talking about SUVs and cars, but a lot of stuff applies to that too as well. So this is about what to look for and what to look out for when you're buying one. So I would say that the first thing is you don't want to finance anything, because part of our philosophy is that we want to not be in debt. We want to own our stuff, right? So you don't just forget it. Even if you have good credit and stuff, forget it. You don't need to finance it. First of all, it's the worst. Financing vehicles that are going to depreciate is a really bad economic move, right? That's bad money math. As soon as you drive that thing off the lot, let's say you bought a new one, it's going to depreciate as soon as you drive it off the lot, right? So we want to think of the economics of the situation and not just ignore that. And I know they look nice and the new ones look all fancy, but what I've heard is a lot of the newer ones are thrown together really cheaply. And just Google that, just search that, how well built are new RVs, and you'll see those factories. You can see factory tours of some of the RVs that are being made, and they're just throwing those things together, man. I mean, yeah, they put some nice paint on the outside, but they're just throwing those things together. I'll try to find a video from a guy I follow where he talked about why he regretted buying a brand new RV and financing it, which is kind of, it's just multiplied bad math, multiplied. So first of all, you're gonna finance. You're going to get a huge interest rate that's going to, you're going to pay all this interest, right? Which you don't want to do that. That's money that could be going into yourself. The other thing is they depreciate right off the bat, immediately. So they're going to lose a ton of value. So you're basically borrowing money about something that's going to lose value, and then you're paying interest on that as well. That's just a bad financial move. So we don't want to finance. I mean, you can do whatever you want. I'm just telling you. You don't want to finance, and you don't want to buy a brand new RV. I know they look nice and beautiful, and you go to RV shows and it looks great, but I don't recommend that. I wouldn't do it. So, I mean, if someone gives you one, or if it's a really good deal, but maybe. But I think the newer ones are not well built. They're not. They're just thrown together in Indiana, which is a paradox, because you would think the newer ones would be better than the older ones. But what I think is that the older ones are better built. I would say in the 85 through 95, or 85 through 2000, that era right there, are better built. And it depends on the brand. Try to find a luxury brand that was kind of upscale at the time. But it's an older used one, so it'll be higher quality. I don't know, if it's older, a lot of the kinks have probably been worked out. I've just heard so many horror stories of people buying new RVs and they have to take it in 20 times, because basically they throw it together, and then if you report a problem, you have to bring it back and they fix it. That's their philosophy. It's horrible quality control. It's just to throw them together and get them out. That's their attitude. So anyway, so yeah, what to look for. So I would say look for a used one, especially if you're just starting. Get a used one so you can kind of learn and practice, and then you can always upgrade. You can always sell it and get a better one. So when you're out there looking, where to look, right? So I'm gonna do a video about where to find an RV really, really cheap, and I'll include the link below when I've done it. But Craigslist, if you look at my video where to find a boat really, really cheap, the same principles pretty much apply. You want to look on Craigslist, I would say, maybe auto auctions, maybe tow yards, those places. You set the search range in Craigslist to 200 miles out of your zip code, and then you start finding all this stuff out in the countryside. that is sitting around. But just real quick, a lot of RVs get bought and they just sit around. Okay, so you need to know that. Like some elderly couple buys it, they retire, they go buy it, they think they're going to drive the country. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they take it out for 1 year and it just sits around. Then their kids get it and then they don't want to sell it to you. So there's a lot of RVs just sitting around. Now because of the pandemic now, lifestyles are changing, and so there's a demand now for them. So it's kind of a changed game. But anyway, what you want to look for is like you want to make sure that it has a good solid engine and a good solid transmission. These are the two primary things. Now in the case of the engine, it's not as critical, because even if the engine's not so good, you probably can find a mechanic that can put in a new engine for you. I met a guy like this who was inspecting RVs, and if you're in the LA area, I can give you his name and contact info. But he was like, his philosophy was he'd rather find one with a good body and put in a bad engine and put a new engine in there. So he knows more about engines than I did, so I'm like, okay. So that's an option. I would still say though, you want a good transmission either way. Transmissions are freaking annoying. Winnebago is supposedly a good model. Rexall, the one I got, they're out of business now, but they were a good model, I feel. The other issue is leaking in the roof. So that's hard to detect, but if there's warping on the side panels, there's probably been leaking in the roof. And the water gets in there between. So basically it's like fiberglass and wood paneling, right? And maybe some insulation in the middle. And then water gets in there and the fiberglass starts to warp. Like on my RV, it was leaking, and now the side panels are starting to warp. But it's not that big a deal. There's ways to deal with that. But if you can, you want to avoid that. But if you get an older RV, it probably has been leaking at some point, and it probably will have some delamination, which is what that's called. So, but you want to try to avoid it. It's not the end of the world. It depends on what kind of roof it has also. I would say you want a good, think of it like this. Think of your RV like a boat, but it's on land. So boats have really good, they're built well, right? Because they have to deal with stormy seas, so they're built well. That's how you want to think of your RV. So you want to get one with a good, solid fiberglass roof, like mine has. You don't want one with a flimsy plywood roof or flimsy. You want a nice, strong, thick roof, and you want one with metal that has a metal frame. Like my RV has, the Rexall RVs, they're built in a metal cage. And the later RVs, they stopped doing that because I guess it was too expensive, and so they just sort of take the walls and they throw them up, and they take the roof and they bolt it in, and it's just like this, and it's just held together by these bolts, and that doesn't seem very sturdy to me. Whereas the Rexall RVs have a metal cage, kind of like boats, a metal cage, rib cage, and then everything's bolted to that, and so it's very solid and very strong. I really recommend those RVs if you can find one. I'm very happy with mine so far. I heard Winnebagos are good. I don't know much about them, but I would say make sure it has a good engine, good transmission. Ideally, no leaking, no delamination. If you see little bubbles on the side, you don't want to start with that. You might get it later, but you don't want to start with that if you can avoid it, because it's hard to repair. The other thing is you want make sure the brakes are good, because that can be really expensive. I had to pay $2,000 to get my brakes fixed, which was more than what the RV cost. But I basically had to completely overhaul the brakes. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 wheels on my RV, so it was expensive. So if you can, make sure the brakes are good. Find out about that, because you don't want to get it and then a month later have to go get the brakes redone. I would say interior wise, I wouldn't worry about that. You can fix the interior. The outside matters as far as how it looks. You want something that looks good, or at least looks decent, or that you can fix up yourself. Because where you're parked is how you look is going to make a big difference in where you can park. So if off the bat you get something that people aren't, so basically you don't want something that people would be like ashamed to have parked across their house, right? You don't want people like if it's if it's a nice RV, people are like, oh wow, look at that cool RV. But if it's some crappy looking thing, then people are gonna be like, oh, dude, what's that crappy RV doing over there? Call the police. You know, like that's so. And I'm not saying it has to be that way in the beginning, but it needs to have the potential to be fixed up so it looks decent. And decent, it can be older. It just, you know, you can look at something and tell how to fix it up. Just replace all the crappy stuff. If there's like pieces of wood falling off, like, you know, fix that. You know, if there's something, if there's little stripes that are all like faded, like just put some stripe decals, like just make it look decent. Like, you know, get rid of all the crappy looking things. But that makes a big difference, especially in a city like LA. That makes all the difference. I see so many crappy RVs. I'm like, why? What? Like, I don't get it. Is it drugs or something? Like, what's wrong with these people? Why won't they make their RV look better? Then they wonder why they're harassed, you know? But yeah, like the owners I bought mine from were very cooperative and they worked with me, but they were working with me and answered all my questions. Now, unfortunately, when I got my RV, I was just so determined and desperate. Like a lot of the interior stuff didn't work. Like my water doesn't work. That's not a big deal. My propane didn't work. You know, I didn't find it out till I got to the propane place. That's not a big deal either. Heat doesn't work, not a big deal either. Air conditioners don't work. Now that's kind of a big deal, but that's kind of a big deal. I would say, if you can, in this order, as far as interior facilities go, make sure your black tanks work properly. That's the sewage tank from the toilet. Make sure that works. Like, it doesn't have to be a flushing toilet, but just, you don't want a tank that's leaking or any issues with that, because that could be a big pain. But your gray tank, which is the water from the sink and the bathroom shower area, make sure all that works. Make sure the drains all work properly, like they're not leaking. Ideally, your water pump for the internal water from the water tank should work. Mine didn't and doesn't to this day. It's not a big deal. I don't think it's an issue. Okay, I'll tell you why later. But if it could, ideally you want all that stuff to work. You want your tanks to be sealed and work properly. You want your water to work. You want your electricity to work properly. There's two types of electricity. There's the DC power and there's AC power. If it doesn't have AC power, that's fine. You can fix that later. But you want all the lights, the DC lights, house lights to come on. There's a meter that tells you the level of everything, like how much stuff is in your black tank, gray tank, how strong your batteries are, and how much propane you have. Ideally, you want those to work so you know what's going on. If they don't, it's not the end of the world. Mine doesn't work. So, and it's been fine. All that stuff's kind of convenience. It's not critical. Propane is not critical. So most RVs, the propane goes to the fridge, the furnace, the water heater, and the stove. My propane tank has a leak, so I can't use it, so I don't have any of that. But I bought a heater. I just heat up hot water on I got a camp stove. That works fine. I chunked that old giant RV fridge out because those things are bad anyway. Like, they take up a huge amount of energy and they're heavy as all get out. And I just replaced it with a little college fridge. Yeah, I didn't need that, and I still don't. Like, it's just a nice convenience if it works. But I feel like if a lot of those utilities were working properly, I'd probably use a lot more water and propane than I needed. So I would say being able to fill your black and gray water tanks from the toilet and the sink they don't leak or anything. No issues with that. You don't want issues with that, or issues with emptying them, because that's the main thing you're gonna have to do. Like, that's a big issue. Make sure all your windows work properly and can be locked, and that they're sealed properly from leaking. Some of the older RVs, the seal is coming off. It's not a big deal. The seal is like something you can apply yourself from the hardware store and just put some silicone stuff around the window. Or if you have money, you can just replace your windows. The thing about the interior stuff is almost everything in there can be replaced or fixed up or remodeled. I'm going to be starting a new series on my new RV called Mountain Dreamer, where I'll show my remodel. And when I do that, I'll include the link in the description. But interior stuff, don't worry about it. You can fix it. Like, you can fix it. Like, you can, if you want, you can rip everything out and build it back yourself. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just more work, though. And the other thing about remodeling RVs is, like, you might think, oh, it's a tiny space, I could fix that up really quick. Well, no, because it's a small space, it's going to require more detail, and it's just going to take longer, actually. Like, I've been painting my RV for almost 2 years. It's ridiculous. I'm almost done. But I'm putting a new floor in. Like, but basically, like, it doesn't have to, like, the interior doesn't have, you can fix all of that. Okay, so don't get too, like, whatever it looks like you can totally remodel the interior, like, completely. Like, so it doesn't matter. I mean, obviously the better it is, fine. I don't know why so many of the older RVs are so drab looking with that brown paneling. Like, I don't know what was going on back then. Like, mine had the ugly brown paneling, so I painted it white, you know. I like that color. I did a lot of, I looked at a lot of different if you want, look on Pinterest for design ideas. And I decided on white interior because what it does is it bounces the light off. So it makes the whole interior seem brighter, more cheerful. Because what you don't want is, you don't want to be some dark, drab thing on a rainy day, getting depressed. No, we don't want that, you know? So that's why I went with the white interior, and it's great. It works great. It's, you know, I have this like beach theme going. It's all coming together. But my main point is that don't be too, like, if it's really ugly inside, you can fix that. You can replace the seats, you can replace the beds, you can build anything you want, you can rip everything out. Like Janelle is her name. She bought this Japanese RV and ripped everything out. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Perfectly good stuff, but that's what she wanted to do.
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Janelle's RV build. Today we break ground. First thing that I did was remove one of the panels from my trifold bed to save space, which is fine because I'm going to be sleeping alone for the foreseeable future. Next, I decided to take out this table futon set. Then I proceeded to take out the second seat. This one was a little bit more challenging to remove the framing to it, so I just did that. Then I ripped out this cabinet unit. But look at what was behind it. Well, first of all, there was this daunting electrical situation, but look at all that mold, ew. But I decided to call it a day. Day 1 done. And we're back, day 2, baby. I didn't really get a lot done on day 2, so here's me taking out some of the steel frame. Here's me using the wrong kind of grinder. And day 3, we're on day 3. So I had to unbolt this water tank. Why am I talking so fast? But then I stabbed the... Okay, so this is day 4. My dumb butt forgot to drain the water tank before I took it out, so it was really heavy and got everywhere. But then I took out this battery. Now we're on day 5. I ate a banana. And then I took a break because my brain hurt, and I didn't want to deal with it. So I moved on and decided that I wanted to take down the bathroom. Oh. And then I proceeded to take out the kitchen. Ow. Okay, now we're on day 6. So this is day 7. I am nearing the finish line, but before I got started with my day, I had to clean up my mistake from yesterday. I decided to go ahead and start removing the upholstery and the ceiling and the insulation, which is what I was looking forward to the most, especially the upholstery. It was disgusting. It was absolutely disgusting. But this is a monumental moment right here, guys, because we hit fiberglass. Woohoo! Day 8. So initially I was going to keep the original bed, but it was rotting, so I had to remove the bed and the control panel that was in the cab. And then I had to remove the light and the ceiling panel that was on the pop top. Day 9, the last day of destruction. And that's a wrap, folks. This RV is gutted like a fish. Ya girl has a blank canvas to work with, baby. Success. Here is my giant pile of health hazards. Anyways, stay rad, dweebs. See you next episode. Toodles.
It'll be interesting to see if she can pull that off. But anyway, the point is that you can do what she does and rip everything out, start from scratch. Or you can just remodel the stuff that's in there. You can repaint things, rebuild things, put new seats in, make it whatever you want. So it's like a tiny house. What else is critical? There's just a lot of gadgets in an RV, and it's hard. Like, I had to find a video of mine where the guy, luckily, thank God, he goes around and he shows what everything does. I would say half of the stuff is just little stupid conveniences that aren't critical. Like the stair thing that comes out automatically. Like, that's not critical. I just went and bought a little $2 step stool at the dollar store, and that's been working fine for us. Like, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of it's that kind of stuff that they needed to sell these features. They needed to sell the RV, but in practical terms, they don't really matter, you know? Mold can be an issue if it's leaking, but it's not totally an issue. Like, I guess if it's leaking between the fiberglass and the paneling and mold's getting in there, that can be an issue. So you don't want leaks if you can. Leaks not the end of the world. Like, if you do get one that's leaking, you can fix it up. You can seal. There's a ton of videos on how to seal your RV roof. You know, it's like everything you need to know is on YouTube. Like, just put the question in. There's like 10 videos on every subject. Like, it's doable. I guess the other issue is tires. Like, ideally you want some good tires. Like, find out how to find the age of tires. There's a little code on the tire. They do this weird code so that you can't figure it out, but the tire place can. And make sure your tires aren't too old and aren't rotten. When I bought my RV, I didn't realize this, but my tires were 13 years old. I didn't know that. No, 17, I think. So that means I've had it 2 years, so 15. And this year they all started going. I went to a place and they inflated them to their normal pressure, which then caused them all to start going, right? So one by one they all started going, which was really scary on the freeway. Especially the front tires. You don't want those going on the freeway. And so check the tire. Just look up how to check tire age. And when you're looking at an RV, check the age of the tires and find out how long it's been sitting. Because even decent tires, if they sit too long, they will rot and the rubber will rot. And I had a situation like that where I didn't know what that really meant. And I was backing up and the front wheel went over a curb, just went over a curb, right? And because the tire was so rotten, it ripped, right? Like, the tire didn't blow, like the tire part was still there, but the actual tread just ripped, like the rubber was rotten, right? It's an organic material that's grown from rubber trees, so it rots. And so I went and got a new tire. I would advise, if you get new tires, go ahead and just pay full price and get some nice, good, high quality tires. My tires cost me like $150 to $200 each, something like that. I use Hercules tires. Yeah, get an American company. Don't get a foreign company with the tires. You don't want to take chances. It's so important, so critical. Just invest the money. But ideally, what I'm saying is, like, if the RV you're looking at hasn't been sitting around that long, find out, like, has this been sitting for a whole year? Like, and look at those tires. So brakes, tires, transmission, engine, critical things. So after all that, does it leak? After all that, I would say the tanks, make sure that's all good. And then you're pretty much good to go. Like, the other thing I think is the air conditioning if you live in a hot area. Oh, and the generator. That's another thing. Make sure your generator works. My generator, I bought that thing, like, they kind of tricked me a little bit. Like, they knew how to start stuff a little bit to get me to think it worked. Like, the generator came on, I'm like, oh, it works, but it turned out my generator didn't really work. And then one day I was trying to fix it and it just stopped working altogether. So yeah, that's pretty critical, that generator. And ideally, you don't want something that's too loud. Okay, it might be better to just buy a new, quieter generator that you have to kind of carry with you, because nothing's gonna say you're there more than some loud generator running. I'll do another video about, urban nomad etiquette, and stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's all I can think of. Those are the critical things. You want something that looks decent also, or at least you can make look decent. Everything on the inside you can redo yourself. You should see my before and after picture. I'll try to show one here so you can see. But yeah, don't finance if you can. Don't buy a brand new RV if you can, unless you just got that kind of money. But if you got that kind of money, you probably wouldn't be watching this channel or even doing this. You just go buy a house and pay cash. So price wise, just real quick on that, I'm gonna do another video on that, but price wise, I'd say if you shop around, see, the trick is you just want to have your money ready to go. Like, be it $1,000, be it $500, $1,000. I think at a minimum you need $1,000 to get something decent. Ideally 2. And just sit there and you look on Craigslist and you just keep looking, and you go to auctions, auto auctions, and you don't make sure you're whatever your situation is, you're not under pressure, because that'll make you make a bad decision. So in the description, I'll include the ugly green thing, which is the first RV I bought when I was under pressure. I had gotten $3,000 in my tax return, and I knew my wife was going to spend it as fast as possible. And we were staying with my mother-in-law, and it was basically hell there. So I was like, I don't care what happens, I'm going to take $1,000 and I'm going to get an RV. I don't care what it is. So I just looked at the cheapest RV, and I called the guy, and I was like, I'll take it. Like, I went out there and I bought it. And that's how I got the ugly green thing. And it was a huge disaster. First of all, that thing was only worth $250, but I was just so desperate because of my living situation that I'll take anything, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I didn't have the time to really research it properly, which is what I was able to do the second time when I got Mountain Dreamer. I just finished up the ugly green thing. You can see the whole series here in the description, so you can see what not to do, what an RV horror show looks like. But basically, you want to be in a situation where you can take your time. That's very critical. And you look and look and look. Like, I was just looking, like for a whole week, just looking. And then one day, Mountain Dreamer popped up, and it was only $1,300. I was like, what? This is a scam. This is some kind of scam. The scams where they put a fancy apartment for $200 a month or something ridiculous. I was like, this is a scam. So I messaged her, and I was like, is this for real? And she was like, yeah, let me give you a tour. She gave me a tour of Facebook Messenger, and you can have them do that before you go out there. And you want a buyer, a seller that's an enthusiastic seller, like she was. Like, she was desperate, and they were determined to sell this thing, and that's kind of what you want, and not someone that's like, well, I don't know, I'm thinking. No, because you're going to have to put a lot of work just to go look into it. So I drove out there. There's a whole adventure on that, and I bought it. I was like, I'm coming right now. When I was like, this is for real, I'm coming right now. Like, that RV was worth $3,500. Just like, once I got that thing back to LA, I had to drive almost 200 miles to get it. But once I got it back to LA, it instantly was worth $3,500 just being here, But my point is that, like, if that only happened because I had my money and I had time to look for and wait for that deal to come. So that's what you want to do. And yeah, and that's it. That's all I can think of for now. If I think of something else, I'll make another video. In the meantime, please like and subscribe, but even more importantly, please share this with whoever you can so that we can help more people escape the matrix.